This looks suspiciously like a detonator. All right, so we talked a bit about this in the panel yesterday, so we are going to rehash a bit of this. But I want to talk about modern marketing attribution, and I want to talk about this from the perspective of what we as marketers need to look for in the way that we attribute things and stuff that we do. And the reason I want to revisit this is because we audit a lot of accounts, we review a lot of different ad activities on a lot of different ad platforms, and 90% of the time this has changed and no one's kept up with it, and the client has no idea what's going on in their ad account. The other thing is, this is actually really useful from the perspective of explaining this to your managers, your CEOs, your clients, because they don't understand it. They have no idea, and they want to know why the amount of money that's being attributed in their ad account is $4.75 different to the amount that's being attributed to their bank account, and they want you to try and explain why there's a difference in attribution. So we're going to go back and look at this. But I want to start with a really simple question. When we talk about attribution today, what are we talking about? We are talking about this from a marketing perspective. So what is the ad, the keyword, the campaign, the audience, the placement, the channel, whatever it is, that gets credit for the sale, for the conversion? Attribution, according to HubSpot, surfaces which interactions a person or group of people took along their journey towards a desired outcome or conversion point. And you will all have slightly different outcomes or conversion points, whether they be an online sale, whether they be an offline sale, a lead that's generated, whatever the case may be. So we're not talking about attribution from the perspective of top level of business. We're talking about this from the perspective of, as performance marketers and people in marketing, how are we optimizing our accounts and working out what's working so that we can better optimize accounts and get more efficiency and more results for our buck. So, why are we talking... okay, cool. You told me I could walk. Why are we talking about this in 2022? Like, we know what attribution is, right? We've got a fair idea. And there's a few key reasons why we need to bring this back and we need to talk about this again. First of all, the technology is getting better. So my dad's idea of attribution in his business was when somebody rings, I think I had more phone calls this month, so my Yellow Pages ad's going real good. Okay, that's fantastic. How do you know that? And when we talk to clients, they go, no, we don't need Google ads because everyone finds us on Google. Or my Google ads aren't working because everyone's finding me through Google Organic. When you ask somebody who isn't a digital marketer in particular, I will pick on all of us, they will go Google because they don't recognise the difference between a paid Google ad and an organic Google listing anymore. Google have done a very sneaky good job at making sure that ads look almost the same as organic listings, even though they've got a tiny little ad flag next to them. So when you ask somebody, how did I find out about you? They go Google, not understanding the distinction between organic and paid. We talked a lot about the focus on privacy making it harder to attribute. I don't really want to go over that a hell of a lot more today because it's pretty redundant. But needless to say, a lot of this change has been driven by this overarching focus on privacy. And Apple have led the way on this, but everybody else has had to fall into line. Google are doing the same things. Google are finding new and more inventive ways to work around cookies. Facebook are doing the same thing because they have to, well, they have to. Apple's making them, and that's half their audience. So all of the tech companies are in line with this idea that people deserve a little bit more privacy. I guess Google are kind of getting there, but So we're finding it harder to track those sales back. As a result of those privacy changes, though, there's now new options available on the market to help us better attribute our sales. And I'd kind of argue that that's one of the whole reasons why Google's developed Google Analytics 4. They needed to, from the ground up, to better attribute their conversions across the entire marketing journey. So they burnt it all to the ground and made all of our lives a little bit more difficult than they needed to be for a little while. Unless somebody here really loves GA4, in which case, don't tell us. And the other part of this is buyer's journeys are getting much more complex, and I'll talk about that in a sec. Because this is how people used to think customers buy, right? They click on a thing, and then they buy a thing. And so our attribution window and I'm sure you've had this conversation with a client or a friend or a customer or a boss. They think that somebody sees your ad and it's an amazing ad, so they click on it and they buy the thing. And look, don't get me wrong, this still happens to a very limited extent, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not what typically happens. So if customers buy like this, then it's really easy to attribute that sale. Okay, I clicked on this ad, I know what ad it was, I know what keyword drove that ad, I know what creative drove that ad, what audience said on Facebook drove that, and they bought a thing, and that's kind of awesome, right? But, I mean, you know yourself that that's probably not how you buy either. How we buy these days looks a little bit more like this, okay? So I might have seen a Facebook ad, I might have then clicked on a Google display ad, I went to a search ad because I'd forgotten what the name was of that thing that I looked at on the Google ad. Then there was a TikTok ad which I threw in there just because Georgia loved TikTok yesterday. And then we might have seen a YouTube ad somewhere in the midst there. And then we usually do a Google search at the end because I know what the company is, I know what I'm prepared to buy, and then I buy my thing from my Google organic or paid result. Now, the more expensive the product, the longer this takes, and the longer the process is. We do a lot of work in tourism paid search. This process in a tourism space, if you are buying a reasonably expensive tourism product, let's say $500 to $1,000 a head, this process, if you think about it, in these steps in between, you'd probably talk to your partner before you spend a couple of grand on a holiday, right? If you had a partner, you'd probably at least check in and go, hey, do you want to do this? When would you go? I mean, I would, but that's okay. And then somewhere in the middle, you're probably looking, somewhere between your Google display ad and your Google search ad, you're thinking, I might ask some friends. Like, I reckon Robina went on that trip recently. I might just check in with her and see what she thinks about that. Then maybe you're looking for reviews online. You look at the Google reviews. So there's all these steps in between that extend this sales process. And so it becomes harder and harder to be able to go, all right, well, there's 6 different steps in that process. How do we decide how we credit that sale back to the steps that were achieved? And so we do that through an attribution model. So with these processes, with the attribution models that we've been using in the past, what typically happens in the more complex buying cycle is the top of funnel activity doesn't get the credit that it deserves. And to combat that, you heard Georgia talking yesterday about the fact that she would go off a marketing efficiency ratio and look at the fact that if she's pushing more into TikTok and the marketing efficiency ratio is staying where it needs to be, then they would continue to invest in it and continue to grow that out. But if you actually want to know whether that works or not, or if you're running multiple creative and it's top of funnel activity like YouTube ads have traditionally been one of the worst. Google display has been pretty bad in terms of attribution. So you're finding that you have an increase in income when you run that kind of activity, but you can't actually say it's this ad that did it, or it's this audience that did it, or it's this placement that did it. So we want to try and address that. A classic one as well, you heard Mao talk yesterday about how Facebook now runs a 7-day attribution window. Most accounts that I go into in Google land run a 30-day attribution window with no consideration over how long it takes their customers to buy. When you then go into their Google Analytics and you look at how long it actually takes a customer to buy, you're finding that they're not getting half their revenue until 30, 60, 90 days after they first interacted with your brand or with your website. So basically what we're saying is by using a 30-day attribution window, in a lot of cases, we're just forgetting about half the revenue and where it came from and what it's doing. Okay? So all of this conspires, again, to under-report conversions on Google Display, YouTube, and Facebook are probably the worst. Georgia was saying yesterday she's finding that TikTok is the same. And that leads us to go off trends in performance rather than knowing what has or hasn't worked. But I don't know about you guys, what I really want to know is which ad was it that worked? Which keyword? Which audience? Where am I best off spending my money? And where should I just stop that activity completely and redirect it into something more impactful? So let's talk about the very fun aspect, attribution models. So let's talk about linear as an example. So linear was one of the very first attribution models that really considered how people buy across multiple touch points. Linear, super basic. It splits the credit for the sale evenly across every touch point, okay? Which doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of ways, all right? If the first activity got you on their radar, that's great. It's great that it's then giving credit to other touch points in the process, but don't you think the touch point that gets them to finally make the purchase is a little bit more important? I would say so. So it was a great starting point in this direction, but not ideal. Position-based, the first and last click get 40% of the credit each. So the first click gets the customer onto your website, gets them understanding your brand. The last click gets them to buy. So then we just divvy up the rest in between the start and the end point because, you know, it's kind of important, but it's kind of not, and it's fine. The only real area we find this can still be useful for is call-only campaigns in Google Ads, because if we're pushing for a phone call, that happens on Google and you need the top position. Otherwise, let's chuck that in the bin too. First click. Love this one. The first click gets all the credit, regardless of how many clicks are in the process, regardless of where the sale comes from. The first click gets everything. Yeah, let's bin that as well. All right, last click. Now, last click, for so many of you, if you go, and I'm going to give you a to-do list at the end of this, if you go into your ad accounts on Monday, I almost guarantee you are going to have, especially in Google, you're going to have conversions which have last click attribution, okay? Last click has been something that Google have been trying to get people to stop using for years, but then paradoxically, they force you to use it for some actions that they add to your account without your knowledge. Super, super helpful, Google, and really understand where you're coming from there. But because it has been the default in Google Ads for so long, people have still got that sitting in the ad account running and ticking along. Now, last click gives the whole credit for the sale to the last click in the process, hence last click attribution. Pretty clever, right? Yeah. So Facebook in particular are, of course, going to say that Meta is very valuable to you and you should spend a lot of money there. Meta says that last click undervalues Facebook by about 47% on average and as high as about 66%. So if you consider Facebook, we find that a fairly typical funnel, Facebook won't get the sale, but Facebook will get the user to consider the product. Okay? So if you go purely off last click, you're completely ignoring that discovery phase that people go through, and you're not getting new people onto the brand. So we want to bin last click attribution as well, please and thank you. So time decay has actually been one of my preferred methods of tracking attribution for quite some time, because when we consider the buying process, it most accurately reflects the way that you buy when you consider it on a fairly simplistic method. So most of the credit goes to the last click, which to me is fair enough because the last click actually makes the sale, but then each preceding stage gets a percentage of credit. The initial stage gets a little bit of credit because it puts you on the radar, but you don't get to the sale. And then each stage warms you up a little bit more until you get to the final stage and you actually make the purchase. However, what this does do is it does undervalue that initial interaction. And as we were talking yesterday about the importance of first-party data, that first interaction, capturing that user, that's becoming more and more important. So this one is also one that we want to start looking at binning. Okay? If you don't have alternatives, I very much recommend you consider this, but there are some more complex alternatives that we can look at. And my last one, data-driven attribution. Data-driven attribution is not that new, but the big change here is that Google have finally made it available to everybody. Okay? If it's not available in your ad account right now, it will be soon. Facebook are using a variation. Everyone's adopting something similar. So in this case, every stage of your process receives a weighted attribution depending on how much the AI decided that it contributed to the sale. So this deals with the problem of time decay where the first stage doesn't get enough credit, because in data-driven, the first stage gets more attribution because it's more important. If there's a stage where the user clicks on the ad and then does absolutely nothing on the site, that gets less attribution. The only real downside of this is that it's a bit of a black box. And the other thing is, like, from a reporting perspective, this requires quite a bit of explanation to management. Because if we deal with, my favourite example is a 90-day attribution window, but you're reporting on your conversions. We had a client that reported on their conversions daily, and every day they pulled their numbers out into a spreadsheet. All right, so every day management looked at this spreadsheet and went, how many sales, how many dollars can we attribute to our Google ads? Now, the thing with data-driven attribution is when the conversion happens, it back attributes all the other parts of the conversion to the different ads, keywords, audiences, whatever it is, in the process. So if it's back attributing, and I fill in the numbers on the 1st of July, the numbers for the 1st of July are different today. The numbers by the end of the month, you might actually see them differ by 50% compared to what you recorded on an everyday basis. And that's simply because you had activity that resulted in people looking at your product, considering your product, but they didn't buy it until later in the month. So then we see the conversion come through, and then we see the revenue come through. But if they clicked on it on the 1st, the attribution happens on the 1st, a percentage of it, okay? So if you're reporting, look, unless you're spending a couple $100,000 a month, reporting every day is just going to make you sad and ruin your life. Please try and explain that to management, that everyday numbers, when their budget is $12.75 a day, are kind of pointless. If their budget's $13.75, they're still kind of pointless. If they're spending $10,000 to $15,000 a day, they become a little bit more interesting, but we still need to have a longer term perspective on these. Obviously, if you go in and your one-day numbers are 0 conversions, very interested in that, because there's a massive problem there. But if you are finding that things are up and down, that's okay. A big one for us recently has been the 4th of July long weekend. No one bought anything in the US. They all got drunk and played with fireworks, all right? Was a just terrible weekend. But 2 weeks later, conversions came in because they still looked, they still clicked, the clients still spent money, but they didn't buy for a couple of weeks later because apparently they decided that, I don't know, that, well, don't buy things online when you're drunk and playing with fireworks, I guess is the moral of the story. And so the consideration for us then is making sure that we decrease our budgets over those weekends in the future, because that's just an ongoing trend in the US where every holiday that's getting lower. All right, so, cool. Thank you for telling me a whole bunch of stuff I already knew, Ryan, but I'm going to go and tell my boss not to look at the numbers every day, so that was at least a little bit helpful. How do we actually fix this and modernize this and do something useful with our numbers? So, first of all, ditch the last click. I know Google have been banging on about this for years, but Google also want you to accept every recommendations in your recommendations tab, and hopefully everybody in the room knows that is a god-awful idea and we should never do that. So I get that Google aren't always the best judge of what you should do here, and you should not let the fox run the hen house. However, they're right in this area. And if you just think about the way that the model works, it's time to go. So what I want everybody to do on Monday is, if you're running Google Ads, I want you to go into your ad account, I want you to audit your conversion actions. I want you to bin anything that is no longer relevant. I want you to bin anything that is not reporting correctly. And I want to bin anything that is a page view, because page view conversions are the worst. And then if you want to switch to data-driven attribution, Google actually came up with a cool tool for you to use. So go to Tools and Settings, Measurement, Attribution, switch to data-driven attribution, and they will tell you which actions you can change, and you hit one button and it converts all of them. Right? Super easy. So that's a thing that you can do on Monday in 5 minutes for free, pretty simple. This one's going to take you a little bit more work, but it is worth it. So part of the reason why we can't get accurate measurement on some of these earlier stage activities is because we don't have the infrastructure to do that. Universal Analytics was not designed for this. You heard Mal say yesterday how it is last-click attribution. It's not just last-click attribution by default. It's last-click attribution, the end. You can't change it no matter what. There is a modeling tool in analytics where you can compare different models. So you can compare last-click and data-driven or time decay or something to see the difference. But it just can't measure the different stages of the funnel. So we need to switch ideally to the Google Ads pixels with enhanced conversions. Enhanced conversions uses hashed customer data to be able to match the users up in a far more accurate way, so we can far more accurately track the journey between devices and between channels. Backup option, if you really can't add your Google Ads pixels, is to roll with Google Analytics 4 events. And if you've missed the memo, please can move from Universal Analytics to GA4 as quickly as you can, because your data will no longer measure in Universal Analytics on the 30th of June next year, which means that you can't do month-on-month, year-on-year conversion, you can't do year-on-year reporting for July, okay? So basically, we want to move over as soon as possible so we can still get some form of year-on-year comparison data, okay? Now, this is officially from Google. Now, the reason why we're recommending the Google Ads Pixel here is because it actually supports more measurement and more accurate measurement. It's been designed for that purpose. So they've updated the Google Ads Pixels. They've updated the way that they measure the conversions. So Google Ads is going to be the only way that you can do view-through conversions. And if you're running display on YouTube, we need to be able to track those view-through conversions. Engaged view conversions, if you use a GA4 event, they only work on YouTube. Non-last click attribution, you can't do that with an analytics event. And enhanced conversions, that will be coming to GA4, but who knows when that's going to happen. So if in doubt, run the Google Ads Pixel as your priority. I know a lot of e-com businesses have run Universal Analytics with enhanced e-commerce for a long time, and it's worked really well for us. It's worked really well for us, but it's not going to continue to work, and it's not actually driving the revenue change. We have seen with clients, even if they just moved to GA4, about a 30% increase in the number of conversions attributed to display and YouTube since that change was made. Does that mean we did an amazing job that month and we got them extra conversions from display and YouTube? I mean, we could claim that if we wanted to, but that's not true. Like, those conversions were happening, they were just being attributed somewhere else. All right, we touched on this a little bit yesterday, but does anyone know what the conversion API is? Anyone? Okay, got a couple, good. All right, everyone's either asleep or confused. Conversion API has come around to push offline conversions into the ad networks so that their artificial intelligence knows when a conversion's actually happening. That's really important because if it doesn't know and it's blind from privacy changes and things like that, you need to be able to pass that information in. And again, like, the Conversions API is getting us pretty close to pre-privacy changes on Apple levels of data in the ad platforms. I'm not going to say it's the same because it's not, but it's pretty close. And the platforms are fairly good at deduping that data so you've got an accurate enough picture of the conversions that are coming through. So if you're not using Meta's Conversion API to push your conversions into Facebook ads, Instagram ads, you are doing yourself a major disservice, and that's your next Monday job, okay? We need to make sure that the AI has the data that it needs to be able to optimize. And we also just want to make our jobs easier because the data is available in the platform that is indicative enough that we can make decisions on creatives and ad sets without having to do more complex time-consuming analysis outside of that. Google do the same thing. And so this is an area where, like, for B2B marketers, you look at leads, you look at acquiring leads, but if you have Google Ads linked to your CRM, you can actually send in conversion activity through their API as well. So your CRM will either have a native integration or Google run through Zapier to do that, but it's the same concept. In HubSpot, we would set up a conversion event for when a deal closes. We want to send that back to Google with the value of the deal and the information about the deal. And that then puts the numbers into the ad platform to say that ad returned this amount of spend. And that, for some of you, who are, especially those who are dealing in agriculture, those deals could be massive, and all of a sudden your return on ad spend looks ridiculously phenomenal. But it's accurate. Now, particularly if those sales in a B2B sense could take 6 to 12 months, that data becomes really valuable if you've got that CRM linked up. If you're in e-com, we talked a lot about these tools yesterday, so I don't want to harp on too much more about them, but tools like Triple Whale and Northbeam are going to allow you to get a much better insight into your full marketing journey and a truer indication of your ROAS and your CPA. They bolt into Shopify, they bolt into all your different ad networks, they bolt into Klaviyo. So they are not just tracking your ad performance, they're tracking your email performance, they're tracking your website performance, and they're providing you with those marketing efficiency ratio figures we talked about automatically without you having to calculate them. They'll present it all really clearly so you can get a more accurate picture of each stage of the process, and they'll even map out your process so you get a really clear picture of what's going on. And they both have free trials, so you can go in there, give them a go, and see what you've been missing out on, and then decide if it's worth the investment yourself. Please don't measure Facebook in platform for management reporting. If you're using Triple Whale or Northbeam, use these. If you're using a CRM, especially if you're in B2B, use the figures from that. Your CRM or your marketing platform will bolt into your ad networks to provide you much more accurate figures than the ad networks themselves. And as we talked a bit about yesterday, consider setting up a dashboard in, if your budget is 0 or less, use Google Data Studio. If your budget is more than 0, then use something more robust like Databox or Clipfolio or something similar to keep an eye on all the metrics in one hit. And don't overwhelm management. Give them the bare minimum numbers that they need to be happy, because they don't give a shit about your click-through rate, okay? We think they should because it went up, right? But they just don't. All right. So, do we know what we're doing on Monday? Yeah? All right. Matt's like, fuck all. Here's your Monday to-do list, and I want you to actually do this and tell me you've done it. I want you to audit your conversion actions in Google Ads, ditch the last click, clean out any that you don't need. I want you to set up Google Analytics 4 and link it to your Google Ads account. I want you to set up your conversion APIs. If you have already set them up, check them and make sure they're working properly. Sign up for a demo of Triple Whale, Northbeam, or both if you're in e-com. People that are using both are seeing some really interesting fluctuations in the data and pros and cons for different business types. And set up a marketing dashboard. That's it. We can do that in like half an hour over coffee in the morning, right? Thank you for that. I appreciate the enthusiasm.
We're done, like that's it.
Right. That's all you got to do. All you got to do. And all of a sudden you'll have a much better picture of the activities and the channels that are driving your marketing return. And since Robina's trying to get rid of me, we'll go to questions.
That's it, thank you. Well, I thought you meant that's it, as in that's it, my prezzo's done. Didn't anyone else think that's it was what he meant in that context?
Okay.
I'm thinking about morning tea, and Jen's going to jump up and down in 5 minutes if we don't get off the stage. So, any questions on attribution?
Really great presentation. Thanks, over here.
Sorry.
That's all right. One of our main marketing journeys is recruitment of foster carers. We use Facebook ads, Google ads, but we know nothing beats a prospective carer talking to another carer, and that's really the thing that will do more than anything. Are there ways of capturing some of that stuff that's happening offline to make your metrics make sense, other than a survey when you've got someone on board, attending information sessions, all those sort of things? I guess a CRM is where you can build some of that intel in, but how do you combine what's happening in the real world within the digital marketplace?
So that example is a bit more complicated because you're dealing with humans and they're not buying things. But using your CRM and using your offline conversions to pass those in. Do you know what CRM you're using? Okay. So just check with them whether you can actually create an event that is foster carers sign up. And then you should be able to push that out where you need to.
Great. We might take one more question if there is one. Otherwise,
There's one down here.
Yep, one here.
No?
Daniel's got one here.
Slightly on the same lines as that last question, you talk about obviously attribution in the lead up to the sale. What are agencies doing to look at measuring attribution for subsequent sales and subsequent engagement past that first sale?
So we're creating separate conversion actions for those in some cases. So particularly, we work with a lot of subscription brands, and with those, the recharge sale goes through as a secondary conversion. That because it's secondary, it's taken out of the main reporting, but it does give us an indication of the lifetime customer value, and it does tell us whether the people that we're bringing through are good people that are, well, I'm sure they're good people because they're buying it in the first place, but whether they're retained customers or not. And those secondary conversions can be quite helpful in being able to separate out that traffic. From a call perspective, we do the same thing. That would be how I would tackle that most of the time. But if we look at something like Northbeam, it will pull those, it'll consider the value of each sale. So it depends on how quickly you become a customer for a second time. If you buy again in 12 months, it's probably a whole new buying process to remind that person that you're coming on board. But you might find that all of the attribution for that gets attributed to something like Klaviyo because it was the email marketing that brought them back.
Okay. I think we have one more here. Sorry. And then I think I can hear the clattering of morning tea. Ryan will be around all day, so feel free to bail him up for any other questions afterwards.
I guess we're currently migrating all of our tags with enhanced conversions now. How do you kind of analyse the impact of that when the attribution between GA and Portugal is completely different?
If you used some form of data-driven attribution previously, they will be different, but they won't be completely uncomparable. But one of our clients did this recently, and we ended up just deciding, look, it's not comparable. So the fact that the sales were completely different, we went, look, this is what the guide is, this is what the figures are, but you can't directly make comparison between these numbers. And that was the best way to handle that.
Awesome, very good. Well, on that note, we might close out the Morning Tea. Please put your hands together for Ryan. Thank you so much.